Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host, Hena Zuberi, and welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now on Muslim Network TV, America's only Muslim-focused TV channel. You can watch us on satellite Galaxy 19, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Today, we'll be discussing the Montgomery County, Maryland opt-out protests. Parents from various religious backgrounds have come together to protect their right to religious exemption from certain lessons and ideologies taught in public schools. For years, Montgomery County Public School District has allowed families and students to opt out of courses about sensitive and intimate topics related to sex, gender, family life, and reproductive health. MCPS changed the policy this year and has said that students and families may not choose to opt out of engaging with any instructional materials. Our guests today are Zainab Chaudhry, the spokeswoman and Maryland director for the Council on American Islamic Relations, America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. She's the first known Muslim to be appointed to the Maryland State Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, an independent bipartisan agency established by Congress in 1957 that is charged with advising the President and Congress on civil rights matters. And joining us is Wael Al-Kusheri. Wael is the management consultant and public speaker. His formal education is in management and finance. However, he has chaired numerous nonprofit organizations, including the Islamic Center of Maryland, the Islamic Waqf of Maryland, and the Muslim American Council. He's currently the director of Family Rights for Religious Freedom, a parent action committee formed to restore the opt-out option in Montgomery County Public Schools. Thank you so much to both of you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jazakallah, for having us.
So Wael, walk us through what has happened, what has transpired, and the policies which have triggered these protests.
So this all started actually at the beginning of 2023 when there were books that were introduced in the Montgomery County Public Schools that really focused on gender relations, the LGBT community, and different issues related to family and sexual health. These books, we did not initially come out and speak about, or we did not have a position on these books. They were introduced into the Montgomery County Public School System curriculum. However, there was an opt-out option that was granted to parents like myself. So I have a 7-year-old daughter in elementary school here in MCPS. Roughly around May, we got a letter from our principal stating that although we had opted out our daughter at the beginning of the year from these types of readings, that opt-out option it has been removed by MCPS, by the Board of Education at MCPS. The problem with these books initially is not just the topics that they're covering, is that after the teachers are reading these books, sometimes in English class, I don't know where else they read the books, there is a discussion led by the teachers. And these teachers are not trained on how to deal with questions related to gender identity. They know very little about the Muslim religion, the Jewish religion, the Christian religion. So this led to us reaching out to our principal, at least, in my daughter's case, to question why the opt-out was removed. So we asked if there was any type of documentation or any types of memos that was sent out by the Board of Education in Montgomery County to the principals stating specifically that the opt-out was to be removed. My principal, or our principal here, my daughter's principal, stated that she had no such data. All of it was given to them verbally. And this was a pattern that we're seeing. There's no paper trails. There's no official statements to the principals and such, to the extent that our principal had told us that she was verbally told that principals actually had discretion. So as of May 1st, there was still quite a bit left of school, and also going into Pride Month, which is June, which celebrates the LGBT community. So she informed us that the MCPS Board of Education actually gave them discretion on whether to go ahead and remove the opt-out immediately as of May 1st, or to extend to the families that had originally opted out until the end of the school year. So that being said, it's been a very confusing situation. We don't get many answers. We're unable to meet with officials. And that's where we are today. We are fighting for this opt-out.
Zainab, can you tell us what CARE's stance is and their role, CARE's role in this effort?
Yeah, of course. And just to add to what Brother Well mentioned, last fall, my organization started receiving several complaints from families in Montgomery County who started learning about these books that were introduced in the school system. And part of the problem is that there was a lack of transparency and opportunity for public input. A lot of parents and families didn't have an opportunity to share their insights. They weren't informed by the school system that these books had been introduced. And initially, we had provided a template for families to be able to use to opt their children out if they wanted to choose to exercise a religious exemption based on their sincerely held religious beliefs. And for several months, the school system was accommodating this request. They were providing opt-outs for families who had sincerely held religious beliefs that they wanted to make sure that their children were not being exposed to content that would either conflict with that or that would prevent these families from having a say in when and how their children would be exposed to these discussions and these activities that were happening in the classroom. Now, in March of 2023, the school system abruptly decided to revoke the right for families to be able to opt their children out. And the way that this transpired was very egregious because it blocked families from being able to have any kind of meaningful say in when and how their children would be exposed to content that in children as young as pre-K in some cases would be subjected to classroom discussions led by teachers who, as Brother Well mentioned, oftentimes are not trained, or they themselves have their own sometimes biases that influence how they teach about these very sensitive, very oftentimes controversial topics within the classroom. And so since March, our focus has been to advocate on behalf of the thousands of community members in Montgomery County who have respectfully and who have consistently been articulating their concerns to the school system, and to make sure that we hold the school system accountable so that these families' voices and their rights are protected. No parent should ever be in a situation where they're sending their children to school without them being aware of what content their children are being exposed to, or how their children are going to be influenced by policies or discussions that conflict with their constitutionally protected rights to religious freedom.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about these opt-outs, because I'm trying to understand this. So opt-outs from sex education courses are extremely common in public schools. I know for my own self, for years, I've been teaching classes on puberty across the country for those Muslim families that have opted out from the public school system sex ed courses and want their children to be taught from an Islamic perspective. So this is not anything new. And we know in Illinois, Governor Pritzker signed a bill that expanded sex ed in Illinois. And a lot of the LGBT community has celebrated that bill. But unlike what we see here in Montgomery County, they still allowed families to opt out of these lessons. So tell us more about what is the issue with opting out, number one, and number two, does this impact other opt-outs as well? For example, music classes. Many religious families opt out of music lessons, or they might opt out or celebrating Halloween parades. So that's the second part of my question. And either one a few.
Go ahead, Sister Zainab.
Sure. I'll say this. The school system has been very obscure in the process that led them to revoking opt-out in MCPS. Back in spring, CARE had a meeting with them along with another local grassroots organization to understand the process and the logic that led them to revoke opt-out. And it was very clear that there was no kind of thought that had gone into, no kind of structure in the way that this policy was framed. We were told that, quote unquote, many people's feelings were being hurt by the fact that some families were choosing to opt their children out. We also heard that there was a sheer number of students who were choosing to opt out of these discussions that led to other students' feelings being hurt. Now, it's really important for any public school system that's funded by public tax dollars to remain objective, to not allow their emotions to dictate their policies that they're implementing within the school system. Children need to be taught that we are different. We sometimes believe differently, we look differently, we think differently, and that's something to be celebrated. In a pluralistic society, if we want to nurture children and encourage them to be individuals, it's really important for them not to feel that they have to conform to a very one-dimensional, monolithic way of thinking. And for school systems to say that they revoked families' rights to opt out, quote unquote, because people's feelings were being hurt, well, now they've hurt the feelings of thousands of other community members, right? For them to say that the sheer volume of families that were choosing to exercise this right to opt out, it should communicate to the school system that this is a very diverse district. Mm-hmm. Montgomery County is home to thousands of different, community members who come from different backgrounds, different religious and ethnic backgrounds, and they have different perspectives. And as a public school system, the administrators have a responsibility to enact policies that create inclusive, safe spaces for every single child, regardless of their background. And the fact that many families were choosing to opt their children out should signal to the school system just how poorly executed this decision was, that there had not been any transparency, there had not been any opportunity for public input.
Brother Wild, would you like to comment on this?
Sure. I think, as Sister Zainab has stated, it's just been very unclear. The whole decision-making process at MCPS has been very unclear from the very beginning. So as she stated again, some people are saying to us from MCPS that, we hurt people's feelings and such. At other times, we're hearing that, this is a form of discrimination and we should not be asking for this. If you read the rebuttal for our injunction that's coming up on August 9th in the lawsuit that's been filed by Beckett Law, that's oral arguments start on August 9th. If you read the rebuttal of MCPS, now what they've said is the problem with opting these kids out is there are too many kids to handle. So the story is constantly changing. We don't even know how or who made the decision for the opt-out. We have some communication with the Board of Education members who are saying, it wasn't even the decision of the superintendent. All of this information is just, it changes. And I'll give you an example. I live in a predominantly, the most conservative part of Montgomery County. We live very up county near Poolsville. The back end of Clarksburg. This is a very, very conservative area. I would say the most conservative in Montgomery County. So when I asked our principal, out of the 178 children, because I know there's 178 children because it's one of the smallest schools in the county, I said to her how many had opted out, how many children had opted out. She said 15. So the reality is they don't know the numbers. They don't know. There's a lot that they don't know. So to answer your question, it's been a plethora of different, types of, reasons, but none of them really add up or make sense.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to discuss more about the lawsuit and the legal filings. Don't go away. Welcome back. We have with us Wael Al-Kosheri and Zainab Chaudhry. So we were discussing the lawsuit right before we went on break. Tell me more about the legal filing. As you has mentioned before, MCPS says that the volume of LGBTQ opt-out requests caused significant disruptions And after complaints by teachers, principals, the district made inclusive curriculum mandatory. So tell us how Beckett Law got involved, and how does this work out between the fact that the state requires sex education courses, but permits parents to opt children out of those classes?
Well, I think we have to look at a couple different issues. Number one, so Beckett Law Fund got involved. They handle a lot of religious First Amendment rights litigation. They're top notch. The organization is top notch. They've been winning cases. Recently, they just won a case. I can't remember the state. However, they are consistently winning freedom of religion, freedom of exercise litigation throughout the country. We were informed of them, and a couple of our families, one in particular with another Christian family and a third family, had originally signed on to sue Montgomery County Public Schools to restore the opt-out. So we've been working with them ever since. Mm-hmm. The opt-out itself is really an extension of the sex education instruction, because the question that has to be asked to MCPS is, why were the opt-outs allowed in the first place? Why did you give us the right to opt out of these books and the subsequent discussions on the books? Why were we allowed to opt out if you didn't think it was part of the sex ed, family life curriculum? So that's a question that has to be asked. When our children also were opted out, what I need to let you know is a lot of these children were treated badly, regardless of how many there were. We don't really know. My girl was allowed to sit in the library. Some of the families that are with us, their children were just asked to sit outside in the hallway, to just, dwell in the hallway as all of the other kids learned these issues. So your point is very well stated, Sister Hena. How will this affect the opt-out in different areas? I'll give you an example. We're only focusing on the sexual education and family life issue. There's a lot of people who opt their children out for vaccines, as an example. So there's a religious exemption that is allowed by Montgomery County Public Schools till today that allows us to opt out if our religious beliefs contradict with any type of vaccine or any type of drug that's given to our children. So the question is, will this opt-out, the removal of this opt-out affect those rights? And that's why, we are countering and working to restore the opt-out so that we can make sure that our rights are not, systematically declining in the public school system.
And to add to what Brother Well was saying, it's really interesting because initially when the school system was allowing families to opt out, these books and these discussions were under the human life, the family life and human sexuality curriculum content. And when the school system decided that abruptly and unilaterally that they were going to revoke the right for families to opt out, interestingly enough, they had pulled these books from that section of the curriculum, and they began saying that these books were now placed under the reading comprehension and English language skills section of the curriculum, or some such a different part of the curriculum that would no longer be applicable, that the Maryland state law that allows families to opt out of family life and human sexuality part of the curriculum would no longer be applicable to. So they were trying to obviously create a way for them to be able to block families' rights to opt out. The books and the conversations and the activities that are happening in the classroom are still the same. And there is a very clear lack of oversight from the school system in terms of what discussions are being held in the classroom. And it's not just about the opt-out in this particular context. According to credible sources, MCPS is the only school system in the country, to our knowledge, that has revoked families' rights to opt out in this manner. And this is, we're talking even very liberal cities and towns on the West Coast, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, California, all of the public school systems to our knowledge in California, even Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Public school systems in these cities, they allow families to be able to opt their children out. And not only for religious reasons, right? Sometimes it's because some child might have endured some kind of trauma or had some kind of experience that makes it difficult for them and traumatic even for them to be in a classroom where there is these kind of conversations happening. So for a school system to unilaterally make a decision that they're no longer going to honor families' rights to be able to opt out, is unconstitutional, it's unethical, it sets a very dangerous precedent, and it leads families to no longer trust that the school system is going to be looking out for the best interests of their families. If the school system is truly vested in the inclusivity of every child within the school system, then they need to demonstrate that through their policies, not just through their words. And these policies need to be equitable for every single student, regardless of their race, religion, ethnicity, background, whatever their orientation is. So school systems need to be able to demonstrate that they have these children's interests at heart. And no child should ever feel like they have to give up any aspect of their identity, or that they might be targeted in bullying or harassment if they speak up for their faith. And what the school system has done is created an unsafe climate for especially faith-based communities by now having many children who no longer feel safe speaking up for their own faith identity.
True. Now, we've seen several hot takes on this issue, particularly by some elected officials charging Muslims of aligning with the far right. What are your responses to this take?
So it really is, it really just shows you the amount of disrespect we get, as Muslims, as brown people, as Black people, whatever you want to call it. It just shows you that they don't really think that we have a brain to think with. So it's not that, we're worried about our children, that we've got so much invested in it. It's not about, our religious beliefs, some of which, are very clear. The Islamic religion is a religion that's 1,400 years old. That's followed by 1.3 billion people. And they brush all this aside. They brush aside, how much we care for our children. And they try to tie this to, the extreme right is using us to further their agenda. I think it's absolute nonsense. And it just shows you what they really feel about us. They just feel like we're, expendable brown folks that really don't think and have to be used by somebody to actually have a say or want to affect change in the public school system. I was dismayed by this type of, talk, and numerous imams have come out and have spoken about this issue and have, spoken against it actually, and made it very clear that the reason why we're standing up has nothing to do with somebody controlling us or somebody pushing us in a certain direction. Is because we truly have a religion that is still alive, an ideology that's still viable, a presence in this county and in this country that is not mainstream, however, needs to be respected. And we should not be relegated as second-class citizens just because we have those beliefs.
And I've seen the takes. For example, American Muslim commentator Wajahat Ali had a op-ed in the New York Times where he essentially is saying that American Muslims have, as you said, that since American Muslims have faced this dangerous reality of bigotry, and which CARE and other organizations work against day and night, that we're essentially politically pimping the Sharia by elements of the right wing in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. And we should be the last people joining forces against the LGBTQ community with those who have demonized our community for political gain. And responsible and respected Islamic scholars, for example, Imam Zaid Shakir wrote in an op-ed in Muslim Matters that Muslims are not reacting to political opportunism of the right wing, as Brother Weil, you were saying, and as Wajahat Ali was implying, that they're reacting to the shock and revulsion generated by the increasingly tyrannical LGBTQ political project, quote unquote. And I'd like to, Zainab, hear your response to these opinions.
It's very interesting how people who don't live in Montgomery County, who are not familiar with the landscape, who don't understand and haven't really had conversations with many families on the ground who have spearheaded this project, this campaign, this initiative to protect constitutional rights in the school system, feel entitled to superimpose their own perceptions based off of tweets that they might have seen or articles that they might have read, and automatically assume that it's okay to insult the integrity and the intellect of the American Muslim community as if somehow we're puppets, right? The American Muslim community is sophisticated enough that we know that we're not going to be exploited by either the right or the left, right? This is not a political issue in the sense that the Democrat or the Republican Party or conservatives or liberals or the right versus the left can capitalize on this for their own agenda, and the Muslim community is going to stay quiet about it. The families on the ground whose voices deserve to be centered in all of this are the ones who have been driving this campaign. And this is an interfaith campaign. This is not just the Muslim community who is spearheading this. And those individuals who try to imply that Muslim community doesn't know what they're doing, or the interfaith community spearheading this doesn't know what they're doing, they're insulting the intelligence and the intellect and the faith values of these communities who have sincerely held beliefs that they are exercising their rights to be able to instill these values within their children. And this is not a campaign that's rooted in hatred or bigotry. It's really important to note that, because those elements that try to imply that these families that are advocating for their rights are somehow hateful or bigoted in their values haven't actually had conversations with many of these families, right? These are families who have clearly said that we just want to have an opportunity to have a say in when and how our children are exposed to content that is sensitive, that could be triggering, that could be, very difficult to help like a child in pre-K or like a minor to be able to understand. And so it's very easy for people who are not in the county, who don't have children in the school system, to swoop in and try to claim the narrative, right? But the narrative belongs squarely with the families in Montgomery County. And we are going to consistently shift that narrative until that's exactly where it is. And folks like Brother Wael and everybody who has children in the school system who have been directly affected by this issue are the ones who are given that opportunity to articulate their views and their thoughts on this. And they believe to have the microphone on this issue.
Thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. So Zainab, I know CARE has worked with on several issues on the ground with a lot of groups that perhaps may be surprised by the stance CARE has taken. Has this impacted any relations on the ground? It's a tough stand to take, and I know that there's a lot of support from the American Muslim community for CARE to have taken this stance. So tell us a little bit more about how this has played out on the ground.
No, for sure. It is a very difficult topic. There's a lot of nuance here that needs to be unpacked, and especially as a civil rights advocacy organization that's focused on protecting the rights of our communities and speaking up against hatred and bigotry. There have been some allies who have expressed concern or who have sought clarity in terms of what our position is. And the reality is that as a faith-based advocacy organization that's rooted in the rights of and the interests of not just American Muslim communities, but all communities who are impacted by discriminatory policies that stand to harm any community by setting a dangerous precedent, we have a responsibility to speak up. And so our position on this has been very clear and very consistent and very focused. We want to make sure that families who have children in the school system have their rights protected, and they have the opportunity to speak up and have their voices be heard. Any public school system that is funded by tax dollars has a responsibility to protect the constitutional rights of all children within that school system. And so, as with any issue that is controversial and difficult to unpack, one of the pieces that we've explored of this is just articulating to allies is that our role in this as a faith-based organization is with the understanding that allyship should never require anyone to relinquish any aspect of our identity, right? As a Muslim woman, I don't go out into the community and expect that anybody start wearing hijab or start believing the way that I do in order for them to demonstrate that they believe in my rights and my humanity and my dignity. And we should be, we're climbing up a very slippery slope if we start expecting that allyship requires that we start adopting one another's thoughts and views and lifestyles, because that ends up making us at risk of losing our own identity, right? That makes many children especially more vulnerable to feeling that they have to give up their Muslim identity. We've had so many children who've said that they are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be labeled hateful, right? Because this is something that our faith obviously never condones hatred against anyone as Muslims, but they're afraid to speak up because there's this automatic cancel culture, or there's this fear that they'll be labeled as bigots, and that's not acceptable or appropriate. So,
thank you for that. While as a parent with a child in the system, in the public school system, what has the impact been on your family? What kind of discussions are you guys having around the dinner table? And do you think that the Muslim community itself is equipped to answer our children's questions when they are exposed to topics such as these?
So I grew up here, and I am much better versed in speaking with my children, just because I've been through public schools. I've actually been through Montgomery County public schools. I went to elementary school here all the way through high school in Montgomery County public schools. But what we are fighting for, quite honestly, so I'm not that worried about my daughter and some of the very diligent parents. So we knew about the books. Mm-hmm. We knew about the opt-out option. We took precaution and made sure she was opted out. What I'm really worried about is a lot of these, and quite frankly, what drives me to fight as hard as we are fighting is all of these immigrant parents, whether they be Ethiopian, whether they be Egyptian, whether they be Pakistani, whether they be, from Czechoslovakia or wherever the case may be. The reality is a lot of these immigrants are not prepared to deal with the indoctrination that's happening to children. So to answer your question, at the dinner table, we are constantly speaking about the encroachment of pop culture into our daily lives. And we're always wondering, do we have to give up our religious beliefs? Do we have to give up our culture and our morality to integrate into Western lifestyles? So this was not an issue 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now it's coming to the point where we're starting to wonder, what are the Muslims going to look like in one generation, 2 generations, 3 generations? Is there going to be anything left of this ideology, of this great religion? That's the real question. So
those of our viewers, what can they who are concerned about this issue coming to their doorstep do? Because this is not going to stop at Montgomery County.
So one of the things that we can do is that we can, first and foremost, we have to orient ourselves. We have to be cognizant of our environment. A lot of people drop off their kids at school and they're not on the PTA. They do not have any relationship with the administration at the school system. And I don't know why that's so inherently the case in our community, because we need to be involved with them. So first and foremost is orientation, is knowledge, is knowing what is being taught to your child in school. I'll tell you, I've been canvassing at numerous masajid in the area, and I will stand outside with a poster and I will speak to the people about this poster. The first thing people ask me is, what is this? I said, well, these are books that were introduced into Montgomery County Public Schools. They say to me, when? I said, it was last year. They said to me, are my kids reading these books? I said, not only are your kids being read these books, I said, there are people we don't know their intention, are actually discussing these books with your children, and they are amazed. So I noticed that a lot of people didn't even know about these books. Secondly, we have to be much more politically active. So we're using numerous tactics, numerous key activities based on the resources that we have to put pressure on MCPS. But the best pressure and the best way to go about this is to vote people in who will protect our children in our public schools. That's the reality. So we need to vote. We need to be out there. We need to be active in our communities. And there's currently a big bifurcation and a separation between us and these communities. We have to do that better. So those are two ways to get started.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what other counties around Maryland are facing.
Of course. So just to add to what Brother Well mentioned, so one of the resources that CURE is going to be releasing in the next 1 or 2 days actually is going to be a toolkit, a resource guide or for families to be more engaged in their child's public education, right? A lot of parents, they don't know even how to navigate the website for their child's school or the school system. They don't know where to go to get information or even how to access that information. Obviously, there's a lot of barriers, cultural barriers, language barriers that prohibit and preclude some families from being able to really access that information that's like located online. And so one of our other aspects that we're focusing on is also making sure that we engage with school systems to make sure that they're providing this information offline as well. Some families don't even have access to the internet, and they still have a right to be able to understand what kind of policies are in play and what their children are being exposed to. So in addition to this resource guide, we are encouraging families to be more involved in your child's education. If you've never volunteered to be a chaperone on your child's field trip, this is a good time to begin when the school year begins, inshallah. If you have questions about how to get involved with your PTA at your child's school, how to run for office, how to get involved with the Board of Education, how to know when the public hearings are, where to go to get that information, how to sign up to testify and speak at public hearings, how to exercise their voice. These are all kind of steps that families can take to make sure that they are part and parcel of the education process for their children. And a lot of families, I think, sometimes feel that it's very difficult to step up to that level. They feel shy. Sometimes people feel shy. They don't want to speak up and exercise their rights or claim their rights or speak up. But it's really important to be engaged because, if you're not engaged, then you're not going to have as much of a say in how your child is exposed to different topics and issues, not even just this issue, but so many other issues, right, that you might be concerned about. And those, at the end of the day, that's your tax dollars that are funding this public school system. And absolutely political civic engagement. I think that there's probably no other issue like in recent history that's galvanized the Muslim community the way that this has. And so hopefully, people, they are signing up and they're registering to vote and they are paying attention to elections. They're paying attention to candidates and where they stand on issues that they care about. And we're hoping that this next election that there will be more Muslims and interfaith community members, all parents, and people of no faith as well, who care about what children are learning in schools, who will be registering to vote and signing up and exercising their votes at the ballot box to make sure that people who care for them and their interests are the ones who are being elected into office.
I just wanted to add one other thing, if I could, Susanna. Normally when I speak to people in our socioeconomic group, everybody says to me, well, why don't you send your child to private school? Why don't you homeschool the child? We cannot give up on public schools. We cannot give up on the public school system because, quite honestly, there's a lot of people in our community who don't have an extra penny to spend for private schools and are unable to run a homeschooling program. And this is 80%, I would imagine. These immigrant communities are at great risk at these public schools, and that's why we are fighting.
One of the larger conversations of this has been within the American Muslim community on how massages, for example, can play a bigger role in making sure that there is accessible, equitable education for Muslim children so that families have other options, and especially from a financial aspect, there aren't as many barriers because private Islamic education is also very expensive, and it's very hard for families to even consider that, in refugee families, immigrant families, those who don't have the means.
Very true. We'll be right back after taking a quick break. Welcome back. We're here with our guests, Zainab Chaudhry and Wael El-Kosheri. Thank you so much to both of you for being here with us today to discuss this extremely important topic. So parting words, tell us how to find you guys, where your website, social media, and any action alerts that you might have.
So we are a parent action committee that is based in Montgomery County. It's an ad hoc committee. Our website is www.frrfusa.org. You can actually better understand the situation in Montgomery County, and you can look at a lot of different information on there. You can sign up for a couple of our different social media accounts and such. I just want to take this opportunity to say that we are a political action committee, a parents action committee, and we have been, so lucky to have CARE and different organizations really standing behind us and advising us on how to move forward. And, that instruction and that advice has helped us reach this point. So you can go on our website. You can come to our rallies. We do a lot of work at different masajid, and we're trying to speak at more masajid. And we would love for you to connect with us, because we really need everybody to stand. Montgomery County is really ground zero. And I want to tell the people in Howard County and all these different counties, this is coming to you. So be prepared.
Hena.
And I would add on to that the trainings that are being held in mosques, please definitely reach out to frrfusa.org. The families in Montgomery County who are leading this initiative are truly ambassadors for not just the communities in Montgomery County, but also all of us around the country, really, who are going to be dealing with many of these different issues if we are not already doing so. For CARE, our website is www.cair.com. That's www.cair.com. This is one of many, many issues that are on our radar that we're advocating on. But right now, it's one of the priority issues for us, because especially as a school year is scheduled to begin again, we want to make sure that the school system is being held accountable, and that these families in Montgomery County who have had the courage and who've taken the initiative to sacrifice their time with their family, their time from work, their time from going on vacations and so many other activities that they would normally be doing during the summer, but who are instead working hard in Montgomery County to make sure that those families who are not able to speak up have a voice. These families are truly an example for other families in other counties. So if you live in a county where you are not involved or engaged with your child's school system, definitely get engaged, get involved, and look out for the family resource guide that CARE is going to be publishing soon on ways, tips, and strategies and techniques that you can employ to become more engaged. And then visit FRRF USA Instagram website as well, their Instagram account, because what these families have done is taken clips from the public testimonies, which really sort of highlight and encapsulate what the sense of this campaign is, what the impetus for this campaign is, and they've been able to showcase that on their Instagram. So, and if they've done it very brilliantly and very, it's a very, very polished kind of snapshot of what's happening in Montgomery County. So, please get involved in your child's school. Learn what you can do to coordinate similar grassroots efforts by connecting with other families. CARE has been at several mosques to deliver rights in public schools trainings. If we can come to your community, it doesn't have to be a mosque. It could be in your private home or in a public space, in a library. We can help work with you to coordinate this kind of training on what your rights are and responsibilities are as you engage with your public school system. We'd be glad to set up a time to do that, inshallah, as well.
Well, thank you both again so much. And as we wrap up, I'd like to just say, as a parent, as someone who lives in the state, this is an extremely important topic. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Justice for All Now. Public schools are for all children, and that is precisely why fighting for these rights is so important. As we talk about this important discussion, and as we look at our own parental rights and their ability, our ability to be able to opt out of school teachings that conflict with religious beliefs. So before we conclude, I want to emphasize the significance of finding common ground and fostering understanding between parents and educators and policymakers. This topic is complex, as you just saw, and touches upon deeply held beliefs and values. It's crucial to recognize that every parent wants what they believe is the best for their children. And in a diverse society like ours, it's essential to strike a balance that respects both religious freedoms and the need for an inclusive and well-rounded education. And to address this issue, it's crucial for schools and communities to engage in open dialogue and be transparent, listening to parents' concerns and working collaboratively to find middle ground can lead to better solutions, like opt-outs. Education should strive to be sensitive to diverse beliefs while adhering to established academic standards. And in the end, the goal should always be to provide children with a robust education that nurtures critical thinking and prepares students for a diverse and interconnected world that we live in, while not having to give up their own identities, their own religious beliefs. And as we foster this environment of respect and cooperation, we can navigate the challenges surrounding religious beliefs and parental rights. Thank you all again, and thank you to our guests again for sharing their insights and perspectives today. Let's continue these conversations and remember it's together that we can build a brighter future for our children. We belong right here in this country. And I'd like to give a shout out to my producer, Asim Amin, our associate producer, Miriam Tisdale, and our wonderful interns, Naira and Abdul Malik. Assalamu alaikum.